Welcome to a special edition of the Andy Staples Show presented by Sling. We just watched Auburn and Penn State, and man, that was ugly. 41-12 Penn State. And before we even hit go live, Brandon Bean in the chat asking, Ari, does this game say more about how good Penn State is or about how bad Auburn is? It's the classic talk radio conundrum. But can I say it? Maybe kind of both?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to ask you that before I read the comment. So we're all on the same page here. It's like on one hand, Penn State going down to Auburn and playing a team that we would say is similarly talented and similarly situated, at least what's going on the field, and just manhandling them for the entire second half on the road is the type of win that Penn State feels like it should have all the time. But on the other hand, too, you read all the stats about Auburn 0-5 against their last 5 Power 5 opponents. I think reached the top 15 last year before imploding, and the one direction that train's headed in too. So it's kind of both, but I don't think that Auburn being a mess should be take anything away from what Penn State accomplished, which is just taking it to a team and getting home and feeling good about itself. Like there's something to say about that.
Tough, like dominated on the ground, 39 carries for 245 yards. It was impressive. Penn State's offensive line looked good. Penn State's defensive line looked good. Like they were getting home with 4 a lot of the time. And it was pretty good. And Doyce 7, was anybody really rating Auburn's D line? Yes, Derek Hall is a very good player. Like they have some players on that defensive line. It's not the best defensive line in the SEC, but it's not a one that should get pushed around and beaten 41-12, even by a team that we think is pretty good. But, I mean, if you look at the way this Penn State schedule sets up, Ari, they should be 5-0 going to the Michigan game. They get a bye week before Michigan. This is a team that can compete in the Big Ten.
I mean, when you consider the fact that we were on this channel, 2.5 weeks ago, talking about how Penn State got beat up a little bit physically by Purdue, and then to this point, like there was an ascension here that you have to take into account. And I don't know if I'm a big fan of playing how good is the other team on the sideline game, because the product that you get from week to week isn't always indicative of how good they are or what they're capable of. Well, all I know for sure is that Penn State went on the road to the SEC into a tough environment, a team that was fired up, a team that hadn't lost yet, a team that hadn't begun to implode yet, which is the word that I've been seeing on Twitter all the time, and beat the crap out of them. So like they get credit for that. And
absolutely.
You look at the 247 Sports composite rankings, and I love putting you on the spot, but where's Auburn ranked if you had to guess?
I want to say probably 18.
That's literally it.
All right. I didn't look. I wasn't cheating.
Okay. It sounds like you cheated, but I know you didn't.
It means they've dropped since Gus left, which we knew was going to happen because Brian Harsin does not like to try to get 5-star players to come to Auburn.
But still amongst one of the top 20 in the country, and Penn State is 15th. And that's a moderate increase. 18 can beat 15 any day of the week.
Yeah.
And physically speaking, Penn State was the owner of that game from start to finish. So, when you look at what Penn State has ahead of it, in the conversation that we had about should Drew Aller play and, is 10-2 or 9-3 a big difference? It's like Penn State doesn't want to hear about 9-3 right now. No, they're 3-0. They've beat Auburn 2 years in a row. Audrey Snyder, our Penn State reporter, tweeted that she overheard on the Penn State sideline, I thought you're supposed to be the SEC or SEC who, you know what I mean? Like those are the types of things, regardless of whether or not they beat Alabama. They didn't just beat Alabama, but they beat a talented team in the SEC on the road.
Team that should have been a kind of middle of the pack SEC team.
And we're talking about a game that had a spread that was 3. So it's not like we're supposed to think that this was supposed to be a blowout.
Yeah.
And it's like the number one fan thing to do. And I get it. Like people always want to have excuses or reasons for things happening, is that, they sucked anyway. It's like, okay, then if they suck so bad anyway, and it's not, then why didn't you go put your mortgage on Penn State to do this? You want to know why? Because nobody knew this was going to happen. And if they didn't know that they weren't going to happen, then they deserve credit for it.
All right, let's talk about Auburn, because here's my thing about Auburn. If they lose to Missouri next week, just do it. In the Brian Harsin charade right now, as Teddy KGB said, pay that man his money.
Mm-hmm.
Just pay him and be done with it. You made a mistake. You've already gotten rid of the athletic director. He's the wrong coach for you. He's not going to be your coach in 2023. So if they lose to Missouri, just get it done and get it over with. This team's not going to be good. I think
Yeah.
we can probably go out on a limb and say
Well, it's
that.
like funny when you look back at some of the preseason podcasts that we had, and it was like we had discussions of what can Brian Harsin do to keep his job, and I think we both said 9-3 or 10-2 would get it done. Maybe it's like when you think about this team going 10-2 or 9-3, how many times could you simulate the schedule and get that result? Like 0 out of 1,000. So like they're just not there. They're not what they need to be or what they thought they would be. And I am still remain sympathetic to Brian Harsin in the situation that he was put in. But I also don't feel too bad for him because he's rich now forever. So, everybody can move on in a different direction. And I think the hardest part about the Oregon situation or the Auburn situation, when I think about their fans, is this purgatory of, well, we know what's going to happen. The writing's been on the wall. We can't recruit anybody because we can't make a change. It's like, just rip the Band-Aid off and do everything that you can to separate yourself from this dumpster fire of a regime.
Just fire him. And actually, I don't know. Here, you've got to find somebody who can recruit me. There are guys who can recruit on that staff. Like, just start sending them out and tell them.
Well, at least start to recruit.
Somebody else will be here. It's going to be different.
And you're going to have somebody new here that is going to be here for the first 3 years of your career, no matter what.
Yeah.
You come to Auburn for the reasons that Auburn is great, illustrate those reasons, and turn the page. And it might not be a pretty end to the recruiting cycle, but at least it's the next chapter. And as things start to emerge, details of who they like, who they're interviewing, all that stuff that comes out of the woodwork, then you put yourself in a position where you can actually feel like you're getting a fresh start. And I think that's kind of the same Nebraska purgatory that they were in too, of just like, what's it going to take to get Scott Frost out of here? And then once he's out of there, you can kind of like think about turning the page. And it's like, I bet you Nebraska fans, as funny as it was, to watch during Big Noon kickoff, like, we want Urban. The beauty of the hope of what could be, I think, is what keeps fans coming back. And I don't know if you can fully embrace that hope and that feeling until you finally make the change that everybody's just anticipating already anyway.
So Nick Mays with a very good question. Better job, Nebraska or Auburn? You put Auburn number 14 of 14 in your SEC job rankings this year, but because of the dysfunction, not because of necessarily the chances of winning or ability to get recruits.
Well, let me ask you that before you I have to answer that question, but how much of that dysfunction do you think remains? You remove, the athletic director, or he leaves and the coach leaves, but like, how much of what happened there is still part of the equation?
It's Auburn.
It's still there.
Say 100% of it.
Yeah.
But go in with eyes open. You may get shanked in a few years, but at least they're going to pay you a lot of money.
I think you have a better chance of accumulating enough talent to be a very good football team at Auburn than you do at Nebraska.
Correct.
But I also feel like I would go crazy with the stuff that goes on there. So if you're saying which job would Ari Wasserman rather have is much different than what job would a coach have, I think I would rather take the Nebraska job just because they have resources. There's a new era of college football, and I can hope to change things there like everybody else has in this transfer portal NIL world, and not have to deal with the conniving and the backstabbing. But at the same time, if you're a coach that wants to take a job and you want to win a national championship, I think that Auburn's a more attractive place for somebody to win a national championship, compete in the SEC, and create a roster that could be respected or respectable. I think that the ceiling is higher at Auburn, but I think the shit you have to deal with is lower at Nebraska.
The issue and the biggest thing at Auburn right now, the biggest existential crisis at Auburn, it's not the dysfunction, it's not this, that. It is that every year you have to play Nick Saban in a rivalry game, and you have to play Kirby Smart in a rivalry game. And you are measured against them.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the best two programs in the country. And so you could be the third best program in the country, and it still wouldn't be good enough. And that is a problem right now. Well, it's just hard.
The thing that's been so special about Auburn and the way that they've kind of, approached or existed in this world is the fact that they've managed to do it once every 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's not an everyday thing or an everyday expectation. Like at Georgia and Alabama, you're expected to win a national title every single year. If Auburn does it once every 5 years, I think and that's what was so confusing to me about, moving on from their last coach, because their last coach was very good at it. Gus Malzahn,
He beat
I think,
Alabama
is
better than
exactly.
anybody else did.
I think that when you look at the Alabama rivalry and you compare it to the Ohio State rivalry and some of the other ones like the Clemson rivalries with South Carolina, the overmatched program in all those scenarios, you could say that Auburn was the best performing one without question it out of all of those ones. So to me, if you find a coach, like if you told Michigan, we can find you a coach that could beat Ohio State guaranteed once every 4 years, you'd be like, yes. Like immediately, right? Like, yeah, I'll take that.
Where do we sign?
And it's like Auburn.
Harbaugh, you're done.
That wasn't enough.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a reminder of what we were just talking about. It's like, I don't think that anybody's going to build Auburn into a team that's competing or winning in the fourth quarter of the Alabama game every single year. But if you could find somebody that could at least duplicate what Gus Malzahn did, then you put yourself in a position to be a pretty successful program in what you've traditionally been.
Yeah, I just at this point, I was willing to give Harsin the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, you're mad about all this. They did not treat you well. Go try to show them. Go try to stick it in people's eye. But it's gonna be bad this season. I mean, look, Penn State is good, but so are a lot of the teams that are left on Auburn's schedule.
Like, where would you rank? Like, I know, Mr. I don't care about rankings right now, and I think that's fair. But like, if you had to do a rank, where would you put a team like Penn State? 7, 8?
Given what we've seen, yeah, I think that's fair, and maybe even a little higher, maybe 6 or 5. I mean, just given what we've seen. Now, it's hard. It's hard to tell, but I thought Sean Clifford looked very in control today, even more so than against Purdue. Against Purdue, it was kind of at the end of the game where he showed up and looked great. I thought he was just great from start to finish. He looked like he'd been running that offense his entire life, and I just. That is the best I've seen Penn State look.
You want to know why?
In a while. Probably I went to that whiteout game against Michigan a few years ago where they just dominated them. That's the best I've seen them look since then.
It wasn't I mean, I don't know. Clifford gets his credit, right? He's the quarterback. Penn State looked physically in control 11 on 11 the entire game.
Yes. And that's probably the better way to put it. Yes. At the line of scrimmage, Penn State dominated.
Receivers were getting separation. Defenders were swarming to the ball.
Backs are getting the corner on very fast defenders. The backs are athletes. The backs, like when they play Ohio State, they will be able to get the corner on Ohio State's defense occasionally.
Yeah, and also that freshman running back on Penn State's roster, Katron Allen, who goes by Fat Guy or Fat Kid or whatever his name was.
He looked awesome.
Yeah, he had a cutback on that touchdown run that was like reminiscent of freshman year Saquon Barkley. Like there's certain running backs that can see.
I'm not ready to make any Saquon Barkley at Penn State.
No, I'm saying he looked like Saquon
great.
Barkley did when Saquon was a freshman.
Yeah,
because we saw him play. Like from the very beginning of Saquon Barkley's career, we didn't know he would turn out to be Mr. NFL number 5 overall pick in the fantasy football drafts. But you could tell when somebody's special and when they have it. Yeah. And I think that kid has it. And of course, he was a top 160 player nationally. So, they have pieces there. And the one thing that I will say is that TJ Finley has the physical assets to be a very explosive and exciting plaer. But the man just was completely overwhelmed.
Explosive is the word I'd use.
Because of the throwing?
No, because he's not that fast.
I mean, he had 3 20-yard runs on long third downs in that game?
Robbie Ashford is the better runner. That's why they put him in. But
I do you think that TJ Finley looked like he could be explosive in that game at times?
No.
I disagree with that. I thought that he had a few good plays.
I thought
I don't think he's fast, but I think
defense bottled him up pretty well. And then Ashford didn't really do much better. And Auburn's quarterback situation is what it is. Like we knew that when they went with TJ Finley after getting Ashford and Calzada as transfers, we knew that's what it was going to be. And so I just think they're where they are right now. And we're going to have to see the Missouri game. Missouri's not been very good. They lost to that K-State team that just lost to Tulane. So Auburn better beat them. Yeah. And Auburn's got Missouri and LSU, which actually are both winnable games. As we speak, LSU is a touchdown behind Mississippi State. But these are both winnable games coming up. If you can't win either one of those, just rip the Band-Aid off. Get it done. Get to the back half of the season with a we got thing. All right, Brandon, he started us off with a question. We're gonna let him finish this with a question here. Auburn over under 6.5 wins.
Under.
Agreed. And look, that gives you 6-6. It gives you a bowl game.
6-6. I think I would take that after watching that.
After watching what you just saw, you would absolutely take 6-6. Which, if you're an Auburn fan, you're just going, no. This
I mean,
honestly,
listen.
But you're right.
They're at the point now where they know it's over.
Yes. At least this gave them. I feel like this gives them some closure here. Like, it's not going to happen. There's not going to be a miraculous, 10-2 season where he saves his job, and you have to then go through the offseason of him still not recruiting well and it not working. So, Auburn, this is going to happen. Just do it whenever you're going to do it, and then hire someone who will attempt to compete for recruits.
Andy, they got Mizzou next week, which is at home. They should win.
LSU.
They should win. LSU, Georgia, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Texas A&M.
It gets super ugly after LSU.
It's like 6-6. Like I think that it's a automatic under 6.5.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's a tough schedule. Somebody asked me for a math question before we go, so let's just give it to him. He said, "What is pi?"
Yes,
it's a circular object with tomato sauce, cheese, and pepperoni.
Sometimes that's what my father fruit and a bread crust, but yes, that's
no. Pie is pizza.
All right, what is well let's use pi. How do you find the area of a circle?
You do something with the diameter.
Not the diameter. You do something with half the diameter.
What's half the diameter called?
The radius.
The radius.
Yeah, pi r squared. Pi r squared, Ari. Pi r squared.
No,
Ari does math.
You do something with You do something with the diameter. You split it in half. Then you hit it with the radius. Maybe do a little pie action. Sprinkle a little mozzarella on there.
Pi is 3.14, and I'm not one of those nerds who remembered it to like 3.1.
3.14.
It's like 3.1415 something. It just goes on. So you could get extra credit by memorizing.
Asking me like high school math questions on this show, I'll never get one right ever.
Well, I think that's what makes it a funny bit.
Ask me about compound interest on the next show. I can explain that pretty good.
That's math. Okay, yeah. We'll do that next time.
Yeah, I can do that when it talks about like financial stuff. I can do it. Not weird algebra equations.
All right, we're gonna make Ari figure out how much interest you're gonna pay on a 30-year fix when we come back on the Andy Staples Show. Thanks so much.